Welcome to Dropping Dimes by Fast Break, an African-based basketball podcast where we have an entertaining, thought-provoking, and unfiltered conversation on the game and the culture of basketball. Good morning or afternoon, everybody, depending on which continent you're on. We've got a very special guest today on this episode of Dropping Dimes, Coach Liz Mills. Thank you for
Cindy,
joining us.
sorry, Cindy, thank you so much. I'm just so excited to be on the show. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So, just to kick us off, in case anybody is living underneath a rock and is unfamiliar with you, you're the first woman head coach to coach a men's national team at a FIBA Continental Championship, a club team in the BAL, and a club team in Morocco. So, this is a very, very special interview, and we're so happy to have you.
Thank you for the very nice introduction. And look, I'm sure you're a woman of first too. And it's so great whenever I get the opportunity to jump on a podcast with a female lead. And I'm sure you're inspiring just as many young female journalists or aspiring journalists as well.
Thank you. So, you started coaching when you're 16 years old. Why did you start at such an early age when a lot of people at 16 are still playing, aspiring to do so many other things? And how long had you played basketball for prior?
Well, the irony is, I actually had started coaching netball
Yeah.
a lot when I was like 14 or 15. I had started playing netball when I was like 9 and had displayed lots of leadership abilities. And so in netball, they did an amazing job of really recruiting early and encouraging young girls to go into coaching while they were still playing. And so my twin sister and I, we shifted across to basketball when we were 15. And by 16, we were coaching basketball. And really, the decision came from watching the Women's National Basketball League in Australia because there was so many female head coaches in the league in the late 90s, early 2000s. And being able to see intelligent, successful, strong women be so dominating on the sideline really inspired me as a young girl to think, well, if she can do it, why can't I do it? And this really speaks to the value of having visible role models. And I know without doubt, if I didn't have Coach Carrie Graff, who was one of those role models for me, if I hadn't seen her marching up and down the sidelines, I would never have thought to be a coach. And I think this is something that we need to do across the board, all sports, is really encourage, especially girls and young women, to take up coaching at a young age. Because as you know, not everybody's going to play for Australia or South Africa or whoever. It's a very small percentage who play professional basketball, let alone national team basketball. So we have to provide avenues into other areas of our sport. And I think coaching is one of those avenues.
And in that time, were you still playing at 16 or did you completely stop and pick up coaching?
No, my sister and I played club level. We played representative level, plus going to high school and then into university, working part-time, coaching multiple teams. So we were I feel sorry for our parents, honestly. Like basketball obsessed. We were like literally 7 days a week. So yeah, we kept playing until we actually moved to Africa in 2011. So we played for about 8 years.
Oh, okay. And when you first started coaching, did you have any personal relationships with some of the people you did look up to in sort of a mentorship? Or like how were you kind of finding your feet at 16 because you were still pretty young?
Well, we were really lucky because we had a male coach who tapped us on the shoulder at 15 and we moved on to 16. He was like, come and be my assistant and I'll mentor you because I can see that you're great leaders as on court, but let's see if we can transition this over to coaching. And along the way, during my time in Australia, we had a lot of great mentors, male and female coaches who really nurtured us and helped us develop our coaching skills. And I think, like you said, it's such a young age, it's really difficult to navigate that without a mentor. And I think that's so crucial within organizations, clubs, schools, whatever, is for young coaches to really reach out and find someone to learn from and lean on, especially in those early stages of their coaching career.
And when you were starting out and playing, what was the basketball culture like in Australia and how would you compare that to the existing culture too?
Well, basketball in Australia is not actually one of our big sports, but anybody who knows Australians know that like sport is our religion. So I was really very lucky to grow up in an environment where women were encouraged to play sport and be in all aspects of the sport ecosystem. Obviously, we still have a lot of gender inequality issues like everywhere around the world. But I was really lucky to grow up in Sydney, have parents who were very encouraging about playing and participating in sport at different levels. And, across the main thing that I see is the development of the game in Australia. It's really climbing up the ranks and is challenging our more established sports like rugby, cricket, tennis, netball. And so it's a really positive sign to see the growth and development of the game here in Australia.
That's really good. And in the time when you started out, did you ever think that you'd leave Australia to start coaching outside of Australia? Or did you think you're just going to grow up there and coach there and just kind of grow up in your home country?
Yeah, look, a lot of people are very comfortable doing that, and nothing necessarily wrong with that. But our parents traveled the world when they were younger, and they sort of gave us the travel bug. My sister and I were really lucky to travel to the US and play some basketball there. We went to the UK and played some netball there. And once we finished our university degrees, we said, let's go around the world. And we've always been really passionate about Africa. My sister studied international relations, majoring in African politics and history. And so it seemed quite unique for us to go, you know what, let's travel, let's combine our love of sport, and let's make something happen. And so we were really lucky to be able to, visit Zambia in 2008. And we kind of fell in love with the country, the people, and we saw an opportunity there. And I think for me, that's when I really started thinking about coaching overseas and the different opportunities that I could have coaching in Africa.
And then you mentioned going to university too. What made you decide to kind of take up sports management at the University of Technology, Sydney, and then also complete your master's in education of sports coaching? What made you go that route instead of doing a law degree or an economics degree? Because I think a lot of coaches, like coaching is something they do on the side and they have a completely unrelated career.
I was really strategic because I'm not naive. I know that as a woman in the sports industry, to be able to sit at the table with the men, I've got to be the most qualified person there. And so I was very strategic. I was like, sports science, sports management, let's combine these degrees. And that was really my motivation for doing that. Plus, I'm very passionate about sport, health, etc. So it made sense to do something that I was passionate about. And then really coming home and doing the master's in 2013, master's in coaching, it was really about being able to elevate my coaching skills. The beauty of that program was that I was able to be mingling with coaches from a variety of sports. And I think sometimes basketball coaches, netball coaches, whatever coach you are, we get too aligned with our own sport, not realizing that we actually can learn a lot from other disciplines. And so that was a great ability to upskill as well as network with coaches outside of basketball. But everything I did was strategic. And I recommend, especially for female coaches, being able to say you've got these qualifications plus these experiences adds value to what you can bring to a team.
And did you ever, if you could go back, do you think you'd study anything else or take up anything else that kind of sparked your interest at that time?
100%. Like growing up, I actually wanted to be a forensic pathologist or a historian. So there's so many other things that I really could have done. And I kind of think back sometimes and be like, And like you said, how many coaches really have qualifications that match or have a degree that match what they're doing? And so I think, sometimes I look back and go, I might have enjoyed, being a historian or studying forensic science. But look, I'm very happy with how it all turned out.
Okay. And then let's move on to your first visit to Africa and the subsequent visits. What first brought you to Africa and what were you doing leading up to the trip that kind of, I think, changed everything in your trajectory?
So, like I mentioned, my sister obviously studied African politics and history. We're both very passionate about sport. I'm also very passionate about world history. Africa had been a big interest to me. So, we had done an around the world trip, visited America, Europe, and we ended our trip in Zambia, working for a volunteer organization called Beyond Sports Integrated. And we were working with children, discussing the impact of HIV/AIDS and lifestyle choices. And so being able to combine, cultural, social issues with sport and using sport as a vehicle for development was something that Vic and I, my sister, were very passionate about. And being able to do that in Zambia really lit a match in both of us, because not only were we doing work that was incredibly fulfilling, but being able to immerse ourselves in a country like Zambia where the people were so friendly, the culture was amazing. We really felt like, coming home for us. And so that's really what inspired us to stay on the continent. And basically, we kept returning to Zambia, and eventually we ended up landing jobs with an organization, not for profit, called Global Vision International. And we were based in Cape Town. And that gave us an opportunity to live and work permanently on the continent. And, that's how we ended up being able to stay based there for a significant number of years.
And what was it about the Heroes Play United game that kind of sparked your interest to kind of actually tell us the story, and what was it like watching that game?
So, as a female coach, be that in Australia, Zambia, South Africa, wherever you may be, you're basically taught at a very early age or entry into coaching that you're a woman, you're going to coach juniors, predominantly girls, and then you can coach senior women's. And so I had never considered coaching men's teams. And so a friend of mine in Lusaka, Zambia, he had worked with me for Global Vision International when we had volunteered there back in 2008. And he was like, "Liz, come and watch the preseason tournament for the men's senior league here in Zambia." And I was like, "Sure, let me go check out the basketball. I'll be a fan." And so I went to the first day of the opening tournament, and I was like, I like the basketball here. And then I really zoomed in on Heroes Play United, because they weren't the best team there, but they had a lot of talent, they had a lot of potential. And then I started thinking to myself, why can't I coach here? And there wasn't really a women's league, so it was kind of like, well, this is the only option. And truth be told, arrogant Australian, I'm like, everybody knows we're great at basketball, so of course I'm just going to get in here because I'm Australian. I never really thought about the woman issue. So I was really lucky, because one of the managers of Heroes had worked for the World Bank, had obviously worked in international organizations, and had a very open opinion about coaching. He didn't care if you were male or female, how many years experience you had, as long as you were good at your job. And so he, looked at my experience in Australia. I'd been coaching there for 9-10 years, obviously highly qualified at that point. And he said, you can have 1 hour of practice. So I rocked up to the first training session. I was a bit nervous, truth be told. And that hour turned into running the full practice, to turning into come back tomorrow, turned into, can you head coach us for this season? And, without that opportunity, I might never have thought about coaching men. So Heroes, I will be always in their debt. And they were basically the start of my journey in Africa.
That's really, I think, a special opportunity. I think also because it was very, very unplanned. So really something that was meant to happen.
And look, this is a story I tell all the time. And I think for women in particular, too often we wait for someone to hand us an opportunity or to create an opportunity for us. And I went up to that team, and I presented myself and said, and put myself in a position to get an opportunity to coach. And I think sometimes we have to create our opportunities instead of waiting for someone to tap us on the shoulder.
Very good advice. And what was it like then after that, the transition, moving? Did you completely move to Zambia, Did you move with your twin sister? What was it like now relocating, if you did, to Zambia from Australia?
So we actually relocated to Cape Town, and I was flying to Lusaka every other weekend, or depending on what game it was, I was able to leave it to an assistant coach. But when playoffs came around, that's when I was there for an extended period of time. And then when I coached them in the next season, my sister and I moved to Lusaka permanently and lived there for that entire season. So the fact that they were so willing to accommodate the fact that I had to fly in and out was something that was also greatly appreciated. And so we lived in South Africa for a little bit, and then we moved to Zambia together.
And when you had moved to Zambia, how did you kind of fill your days outside of basketball? Because it's a new country, new everything, and you just had your sister and the 12 people on the roster and the coaching staff.
Well, we were both really lucky because we landed positions at the Olympic Youth Development Center in Lusaka, which was a project by the UN and the International Olympic Committee, where they built these big sports facilities, and it was supposed to basically be a hub for Southern Africa. I was employed as their high performance manager across multiple sports, and my sister worked under the CEO of the center. So we were both employed full time, and at this stage, we had both been dating Zambian men, and so we were able to really integrate into life in Lusaka. We had our partners, we had obviously basketball team, we had our work colleagues, so it was really a seamless way of integrating into Lusaka life. And we were I was so lucky with Heroes because they embraced me, they embraced my sister, and we really became part of the family.
That's actually, I think, very interesting that you got the opportunity to kind of build from the ground up in Southern Africa, because we don't often hear about those opportunities. So
yeah, they're hard to come by, Southern Africa. So I definitely know what you're saying there.
And what was the first season like with the team?
So, look, I think the best thing about Heroes were there was nobody who was incredibly egotistical. And for a men's team, that's rare. And so being able where everybody was willing to do whatever it took to make us successful. And when you have people who are willing to put aside individual accolades, play team first basketball, and they were all coachable. And that's rare as well, having 12 players who are going to do whatever it takes to win. And it's honestly one of my most favorite teams that I ever worked with. And it's an admiration. It's admirable that all these players had never been coached by women. They'd never been coached by, an Australian or a foreign coach, but they didn't ever blink an eye. They just saw that I knew what I was doing, and they came along for the ride with me. And we were really lucky to be national champions that year. I shouldn't say luck, we worked really hard. It was the first time in 8 years that Heroes had won a championship. We came from the last position in playoffs to win. And so it was really, honestly, a fairy tale season. And it's still one of my favorite accolades that I've ever achieved in Africa.
And then when did you decide to then leave Heroes Play United, but still stay in Zambia and coach Matero Magic? What kind of made you make the shift?
Well, I spent 2 years with Heroes, and then I came back to Australia to do my master's. And then I actually started working in Kenya. I ran the National University Basketball League. And then I got a call from Matero Magic. They had struggled to win the championship for the last 2 years. And ironically, it was Heroes who had beaten them in the finals. And so they gave me a call while I was in Kenya, and they said, look, we're about to hit playoffs. Can you come down and coach us for, this final stage? And it was great to be able to come back to Zambia after being there on and off, and to work with a highly talented team who had been used to success, and the opportunity to coach other players and build other relationships outside of Heroes and the National University team that I had worked with. So I really enjoyed my time there, and it was another opportunity to, help develop basketball in Zambia.
And Do you think, like, do you prefer kind of getting a team at the playoff stage where it's just one final push, or like building from preseason then throughout the regular season?
Look, I don't mind either. There's a lot more pressure in playoffs, and when you haven't had that ability to build, it's a bit more challenging. But I'm always up for a challenge. But being able to build relationships and your opportunity to develop the team, not only from tactical perspective, but from a camaraderie perspective, is also really rewarding. So both, I enjoy both. And throughout my career, I've done leagues, I've done playoffs, and then I've done, tournaments and qualifiers. So I like to keep it interesting and not limit myself.
And then you had moved to Kenya at that point, but you had flew into Zambia. But then there was AfroBasket coming up, and I've heard in other interviews that that was a big goal of yours. How
Mhm.
did it feel not qualifying for the 2017 AfroBasket? And I think from a basketball perspective, but also at personal level, what did that moment kind of signal for you?
Oh, look, up until that point, I basically thought I was Greg Popovich. I thought, 2 championships in Zambia. I had led the national university team to their best records, and I was basically becoming a big fish in a small pond. And this failure, as I see it, was absolutely necessary, and it was crushing because we basically knew from our first game that we weren't going to qualify because South Africa absolutely killed us. I think it was like by 25 points. Then obviously we had Angola, who had dominated the region. They beat us twice. And then we managed to beat South Africa in the last game by 23. So we missed out by 2 points on potentially qualifying as qualifying for the event. And then the irony was South Africa pulled out of it anyway. So for me, though, it was something I desperately needed. That failure was a slap in the face to stop being comfortable. And I came back to Australia after, and I'm happy to admit I sunk into a very deep depression. It took a lot of effort for me to get out of bed, a lot of self-pity. And when I had friends and family finally pull me up and be like, because I didn't want to coach anymore. That's how deep it got for me. I was like, I'm never going to coach again. This is terrible. I couldn't get to AfroBasket. This was my number one goal, and I failed. And the ability of my friends and family to pull me back up and also force me to look in the mirror and assess how I had, things I'd done really well, but things I needed to improve. And that forced me to, look into basketball analytics, look into film, look into ways that I can upskill in building relationships with players, building teams, and to finally get out of Zambia because I was too comfortable. And when you know that you're comfortable, you know that you're not going to grow and develop anymore. And so without that failure, I wasn't able to really assess myself and improve further on. And I would probably still have kept coaching in Zambia, and I wouldn't be able to coach the teams I had ever since then.
And do you think, how did that kind of shape your passion for the African basketball game? Because then you mentioned you didn't want to coach anymore, you went back to Australia.
Mhm.
So did that kind of, in the moment, I think it hurts a bit, but like what foundational things that helped build for African basketball and your passion, like reigniting it?
For me, I had a lot of unfinished business with the Angolans. There's only so many times that you can lose to someone before you're like, okay, I take this personally. So not only at the club level had I really, struggled to beat them because this was in the height. They were still dominating the continent in 2011, 12, 13, 14. And it wasn't really till 15 that Nigeria, Tunisia, everybody really came to the forefront. And so in my mind, I was still very determined. I was like, African basketball is where it's at. There's so many great teams, not just Angola. There's so many great players coming up. And I know as a female coach, I have opportunities here. But really, I was very driven about being the first woman to coach at AfroBasket. That was something that I was still really adamant about. And also, I wanted to take those Angolans on. And Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit later as well.
No problem. And in that time, and as you were becoming, as you said, a big fish in a small pond, were there other coaching positions outside of Africa that you maybe considered? And what kind of influenced your decisions to take jobs inside Africa?
So when I came back to Australia, there was a heavy push to continue going back to my club and coaching, junior teams or like under 21 boys teams. So there wasn't a respect for African basketball here that really turned me off from coaching back in Australia. And for me, it was about continuing to grow and develop as a coach. And I really felt that I could continue to do that in Africa. And at the time, I was still with my Zambian boyfriend, and that made sense for me to continue living there with him, or at least be on the continent so I could be, within a plane distance away. Australia and Africa, as we all know, is very far. I also had developed a lot of friendships there, and different job opportunities still in basketball, but more on the management side. So that was something that I really wanted to continue to grow and develop. And so for me, it made sense to continue coaching on the continent, not only from a personal perspective, but from a professional perspective as well.
Okay. And then did that kind of influence your decision to take the head coach of the Kenyan men's national team? Or how did that opportunity come about?
Well, really, it didn't come about from spending time in Kenya, actually. It came about from me coaching in Rwanda first. I had coached a Patriots BBC, a club team in Rwanda in the 2019 BAL qualifiers for their first season. And I'd also coached in Cameroon with their national team as an assistant coach. So building a reputation outside of Zambia was critical. But Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, they have a very close relationship in East Africa. And so being able to coach in that East Africa championship, East and South, because, Mozambique, Zambia were at these tournaments as well. And so that shone a spotlight on me as a coach in that region. And that is really what basically gave Kenyans an ability to come and see who was Coach Liz Mills, because up until that I'd been really just in Zone 6, Southern Africa, and that led to their team manager reaching out, and we started building a relationship. A really great female general team manager called Maxine, and we built a relationship which led to me being given the opportunity to head coach the Kenyan men's national team for AfroBasket qualifiers in 2021.
And Kenya was ranked 118th before heading into the qualifiers. What attitude did the team kind of have going into the tournament? Did you guys have a chip on your shoulder, or did you know that this is something you guys could do?
I think what I really love about all the teams I've worked with, but nobody highlights this more than Kenyans and that national team, is they did not care who they were playing. And I think it was almost an ignorance and a naivety, because I definitely knew who we were playing. So I think not having really competed at these tournaments at this level before, they had been successful at AfroCan in 2019 and had been building towards getting back into AfroBasket. But the players really weren't intimidated by Senegal, Angola, whoever. They felt they could compete with anybody. And so as a coach, it was up to me to foster that energy and belief, as well as make sure that they were actually prepared for these basically elite African teams. But underpinning it all was the camaraderie of this team, the sacrifices that all these players had made along this journey. And it's a credit to their previous coaching staff as well, that we were able to come together in Cameroon and, against the odds, being ranked 118th, going up against, Senegal, Angola, even Mozambique was ranked higher, and believing that we could qualify no matter what.
And tell me about that game against Angola. What was the game like, and what's the one moment or one thing about that game that you'll always carry with you?
For me, we had actually the previous day lost to Senegal by 18. And we all didn't want the pressure of having to beat Mozambique in that last game. So we went in looking to beat Angola. And under the previous coach, they had lost to Senegal by 40. They'd lost to Angola by, I think, 25. And so, you know, in the back of their minds, I know that these were things that they were thinking about, but they had never prepared the way that I had prepared this team before. And I think that gave them extra confidence in terms of, you know, scouting, film, analytics, on-court preparation was a lot different under the coaching staff that I put together. And so when you combine, when you have a team that is prepared, that gives them confidence, it trumps pressure and can be your competitive advantage. And I know Angolans are very arrogant. They were, and so they looked at us as, oh, it's just Kenya. And I knew we had to use that to our advantage. The biggest thing about that game was we were actually down by 25 points at one point. And it wasn't, I got into halftime, I was very calm, and I gave the players this sense of belief. I said, we are going to win this game. I don't care how much we go down by, but we're going to win this. And let's concentrate on these, you know, tactical things. We execute these and we win the game. And a lot of players will say the same thing about the game. I say this all the time. I woke up that morning knowing that we were going to win it. And that's a feeling that's very, very rare. And I haven't ever had it ever since. I sometimes get but this was a game. That's why when we went down by 25, I was like, I wasn't even panicked. I'm like, don't worry, we're going to win. And there's even a timeout, 5 minutes to go, where I actually say 5 minutes, in 5 minutes time, we're winning this game. And so the ability to come back from 25 points, to win it the way we did, buzzer beater by Tyler Ongwe, we win by 1. It was just an amazing experience. And to share it with the whole team, to know that Kenya was finally back in AfroBasket after 28 years, to know that I've finally beaten an Angolan team, to know that I will be the first woman to ever coach at a continental championship. So there was a lot of weight to that win, and I couldn't have been more proud to do it with that group of players.
And what did it, with the team, there's obviously the joy of we did it, we finally won. But for yourself, was it joy, or was it like now a lot more pressure because you're not just a coach and Kenya has kind of reached the peak almost of this unsurmountable mountain, but now you're a female coach. So then how long did the joy last before it like kind of transitioned into like, okay, there's a bit of pressure now beyond just being a coach? Because I think as women, you can do something, but you kind of have to do it 10 times better to be considered just like everybody else.
100%. It's all about, you know, being able to achieve something and then prove that you can do it again. The joy was very short-lived because we had to play Mozambique the next day. But, you know, when we got back to Kenya, we celebrated. And then I got back to Australia, and it was really all about how do we prepare so that we can represent this country to the highest of our abilities at AfroBasket. But then it was also that pressure of being the first woman to do this. And how do I represent women to the best of my abilities? Because as you know, if I fail, it's a matter of, oh, all women can't do this. And so there was an immense amount of pressure. And I knew that as long as I could get this team to compete at a level that we could be proud of, that I could coach to the highest level of my abilities, that I would make women proud regardless of the results. And I think that comes with preparation, that comes with confidence, that comes with how you carry yourself, and being very aware of, as soon as I leave my hotel room, I'm Coach Liz Mills, and I'm going to be judged for everything that I do. So wearing that, it can be heavy at times, but if it means that I can push, you know, the gender issue forward, and I can get more federations, more club presidents to think about hiring women, then I am more than willing to take the bullets, take the criticism, take the failures, so that the next woman coming behind me, her journey is easier.
That's really great. And I think you have made it a bit easier, not just for coaches, but for every woman on the African continent is interested in sports.
Well, I hope so.
And at the top of 2022, you took the position as the head coach of AS Saleh, making you the first female head coach of a men's team in the Arab world and the first female coach in the BAL. What was that experience like? And what was now the cultural differences and the differences between moving from Zone 6 to East Africa to now the Arab world?
Look, I had always really wanted to go to North Africa. I had coached with Cameroon in Tunisia, so that was like my first opportunity to go to North Africa. So I was really excited about coaching in Morocco, and I was really pleasantly surprised to see how open-minded they were, and I never felt any kind of pushback about being a female coach working in Rabat, which is where where I was based, which is across the river from Salé, where the team is based. The Moroccan people welcomed me with open arms, very friendly, and I immersed myself in the Arab culture. It was my first time living in an Arab country, being in a Muslim country, and it was such an amazing and awakening experience. And I had a great time, immersing myself in the culture and the history. Now, unfortunately, it was very challenging team to coach. We had, unfortunately, very poor management at the top. And when you have poor leadership, it makes it very hard for everybody underneath to really be able to work to their best abilities, and not only from coaching staff, but down to players. And often as coaches, like I said, with, failing to qualify in 2017 for AfroBasket, being in those challenging environments really shows you what kind of mental strength and fortitude you have, and how you can navigate really negative and challenging environments. And so I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about how, things that I wouldn't do, or things I needed to do next time when I join a team. Like, for example, I didn't recruit any of our imports for AS Saleh, and that was a big issue for our team moving into playoffs for the BAL. And, moving to my next job with ABC in Cote d'Ivoire, I wrote it into my contract to make sure that I had sole responsibility of bringing in our international imports, because I'd learned my lesson in Morocco. And so, sure, we made the playoffs in the BAL, and that's always a great achievement to, make sure that you get your team to the best possible position. But one of the greatest things out of that time in Morocco was the relationship I built with Abdoulaye Harouna, who was an amazing player for us from Niger, is one of the best players in the BAL, and he came and joined me in Cote d'Ivoire for ABC. And if I had never been in Morocco, I would never have built this relationship with him. And to this day, this is one of the best relationships I've ever had with a player.
And what made you move from ASL to ABC? Because it was pretty short-lived, I think, your experience in Morocco. So what made you kind of move to then ABC Fighters?
Look, there was a lot of issues in Morocco, and so I was very happy to end my contract there and move on. It was a great experience to be able to participate in the BAL and to coach in Morocco in terms of their national league, and to, live in Rabat and get to know Moroccan people. I will forever be grateful for that. But when you know that this isn't the right environment for you, it's best to move on. And I knew that I had learned everything I could coaching in AS Saleh. So my next step was to go to BAL qualifiers later that year. And because everybody thinks automatically that, of course, I'm Coach Liz Mills, I must have job opportunities, right? So no one was asking me because they thought I already had roles. And so I went to Abidjan and I watched the Elite 16, yes, of the Western Conference. And I sat down and spoke to a number of different presidents and started negotiating contracts to work with their teams there. And I settled on ABC not because they won the conference. It was more to do with, I really liked their local players. There's three things you need to win the BAL, and that is having great local players, great imports, and playing defense. And for me, the Ivorian domestic league is very good, and they have developed a lot of great local players. And so I knew I felt comfortable in Abidjan. I have immense respect for the Ivorian national team that has been very successful over the last decade. And so it gave me an ability to, be in West Africa for the first time, and another cultural experience and personal growth and professional growth opportunities as well.
And ABC kicked off season 3 in the Sahara Conference, and they got off to a 1-1 start in conference play. What was it like getting up to, I don't say it's a rocky start because you don't know where you kind of lie. And what conversations were you guys kind of having after the first 2 games? Because you guys ended up qualifying for the playoffs and you guys beat US Monastir. So what shift do you guys think you had to make after the first 2 games?
Look, I think first and foremost, it was all about this team had never played in the BAL before. So this was their debut season. And I think we were really just concentrating game to game. And the first and foremost, we had to get that win against AS Douanes in the first game of the season. We had to come out. That was the game that we were prioritizing over everything. Because if we had lost that game, we don't know if we had the ability to come back and win games. And so that was the game that we focused on. And because we were so happy to have won that game, we beat them at home. They had a loaded roster. No one expected us to win that game. So I think, and this is something as a coach I definitely should have managed a bit better, was that high, but then coming back down and managing that next game. Reg from Rwanda has a wealth of experience competing in the BAL, and I think we took our eye off the ball. In my mind, we were the better team, and to have lost and played the way we had played was very disappointing. But we had all seen Monastir. We had seen how they performed in their first 2 games, and we felt really confident, thinking Tunisians are a little bit like Angolans, a little bit arrogant. And I think they kind of felt like, even how they had only brought 2 imports to the Sahara Conference, they were overconfident, and we knew we could use that against them. And so it was about being able to, we needed to lose that Reg game to reset and refocus. And I think if maybe we'd won AS Douanes, won Reg, we probably would have lost to Monastir because there wasn't that hunger and urgency. And so for us, it was resetting, changing our mindset, and being really prepared going into that game. And once we got in front, it was really about making sure that we never let them get back in the game. And obviously, Abdoulaye Haruna, Mike Fafana, Stefan Kanate had amazing games, and Chris Obeka was huge for us defensively. So we really had standout performances from a number of different players in that game too.
And you mentioned that in your contract with ABC, you had to put in that you were responsible for recruiting the players. What informed your decision to have an all-African roster, which I think is very rare because we see a wealth of talent coming into the BAL? So what kind of informed that decision?
Look, I've been now on the continent for 12 years. I've built great relationships all over the continent. I've got immense respect for the players who play here or Africans who play overseas. So I know that we have the talent to basically develop and build the league ourselves. And I think as an Australian, I'm not overawed by Americans. I don't think they're the be-all and the end-all. I'm not going to worship the ground they walk on. And so for me, I don't think just because you played in the G League or just because you played Division 1 college, okay, great. So has 600 other people. What have you done since then? And I think that's the mistake a lot of these teams are making. They're pulling these rookies who have never played anywhere outside of America, haven't played overseas, don't understand the cultural and stylistic differences. And so I want proven athletes who understand Africa, who understand the game, because then you don't have to necessarily coddle them like you would have to do for someone who hasn't played in Africa. And also for me, it's about high character. I see a lot of these imports being recruited, and if teams had done their due diligence, a lot of these players wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't have seen clubs have a lot of problems with their imports due to behavioural issues like we saw not only last season, but this season. And so for me, The only reason I didn't have an all-African team during the Sahara Conference is timing. A lot of the elite African players are playing in Europe, and their seasons don't finish till April or May, possibly June. And so in February, when we submitted our rosters, and I knew there was this confidence that we were going to make playoffs. That's always the end goal. I had made sure to put these players in our 15-man roster, knowing that they would be available come June. And so the players we used in the Sahara Conference were kind of like a stopgap. We needed to use them until we made playoffs. And, maybe, and I had said to, these other players, if these players in the Sahara Conference are exactly what we need, we won't be making any changes. But we wanted to upgrade for playoffs. And so we brought in Tyler Ongwe from Kenya, who had been playing in Russia, which is probably the second best domestic league in Europe. We were able to bring in Ousmane Drame from Guinea, who'd been playing in Poland and has played in Pro A in France and high-level European basketball, and Omar Abada, who in my mind is the best African point guard on the continent and two-time AfroBasket champion. All these players have experience playing in Africa. All these players are high-character individuals, and most importantly, all these players play both ends of the floor. They are amazing offensively, but more importantly, they are lockdown defenders. And they highlight the immense talent that we have in Africa. And so I think for me, I was really proud to have been able to put a team together like this, because we had great players in our Ivorian local players. Stephen Kanate is an OG of African basketball. We have great young talent in Fama Kone, Musa Kone, and then we had Abdullahi Haruna, Tyler Ongwe, Omar Abada, Ousmane Drame. I honestly, it felt like I was coaching an all-star team, and it was such a privilege to work with them.
And you guys made it to the playoffs, and then you unfortunately fell to Petro in the quarterfinals, 88-84. What did this season of the BAL and this experience mean to you?
Look, I enjoyed this season immensely, and it was another great opportunity to showcase the amazing talent we have in Africa. And I was proud to work with a team that everybody, overlooked, underestimated. And realistically, we were 4 points away from causing a major upset, having only practiced for 4 training sessions together. And I think that's what probably hurt the most, because we as a team knew that we could have been a title contender. We could have won if only we had been able to have one more week of preparation or had one friendly. But, that's sport. There's a lot of what ifs. And we were really proud to have played that well, considering all the challenges we faced. And for me, it really hurt. This was last season. It was kind of like, I was so relieved when we got knocked out because it was all over. But this season, I was like, I was gutted. And it really, because I knew we could win. And I knew that we had everything in place to be able to win. And so it was hard reflecting on that loss. And but I was so proud of our team and how we pulled together. And it really kind of, I'm ready for season 4. Can we get there already? So it gave me extra motivation to come back next year, not necessarily with ABC, but, coming back and coaching in the BAL again and building another team or working with ABC towards winning a title. And because not only is it important for whatever club team that I'm working with, but if I can be successful as a woman and I can win a BAL title, it means that we as women can be successful at the highest levels in professional men's basketball.
And because you are the first female head coach to do a lot of things and break a lot of barriers, not only basketball, but in sports at large, what does it mean to you, and what things do you think you've had to be mindful of having so much visibility in the space?
For me, it's being very mindful of behavior and presenting the best possible image of a female coach. And, like I mentioned, it's very much as soon as I walk past my, my room door, apartment door, wherever it may be, I'm Coach Liz Mills. And I've got to be the best that I can possibly be every single place that I am present amongst basketball people, be that in the hotel, be that in a BAL for her meeting, be that on court, wherever it is, I want to represent women to the highest caliber. And that means, making sure I'm really prepared, be that for a podcast, be that for a post-match interview, be that coaching, be that at training. And so I take being a role model and being the first to do what I've done very seriously. And I hope that being as visible as possible in a way has meant that some girl, be that in, Zambia, Ireland, the Philippines, wherever, can look at me and say, if Liz is doing this, then I can do this. And so it's worth every single heartache, challenge, or success. And I know that, I can, when I retire, I can look back and be proud more of my off-court achievements than anything I did on the court.
And I've seen you coaching in your signature boots. How important is it for you to keep that as a staple in your wardrobe as a head coach?
Well, first and foremost, it really started off as being a little nod to my femininity and being very much like, I'm very proud to be a woman and I'm not going to let you forget that I'm a woman. Too often, I'm in track pants, I'm in sneakers. And so to be able to, bring a little bit of femininity to my uniform was something that I have kept for basically the last 10 to 12 years. I did try to change the look once and I got public outrage. So I have to keep them. But yeah, and also you got to remember, I'm only 5'11". And so, it gives me a couple of inches so that I don't constantly have to do this all the time. So makes me at least 6'2". So yeah, look, and it's also like when I was watching, the WNBL and even the WNBA now, these women are dressed professionally in corporate attire. And I know that I would wear boots and, business pants and a blazer or whatever in a corporate environment. And that's exactly what I'm doing on game day. So it's also about being professional as well.
And you founded an all-female coaching network with your sister. Can you tell us a bit about what led to its inception and just all about the network?
So the network is called the Global Women in Basketball Coaching Network, and it was really inspired by the female coaches that reached out to me after the success of the Kenyan men's national team in 2021. Often as a female coach, especially one who has left their home and coaching in a completely foreign environment, plus coaching men, I felt like I've basically been on an island by myself. I've had to be mentored by men because there's been no women who have been doing what I've done. And then when I started to get all these emails, text messages across my social media platform, I understood that there were so many female coaches out there who needed a mentor or wanted just to talk to another coach. And I also found there was a lot of female coaches working with men's teams in their home countries that hadn't ever had a mentor to or needed someone to listen to or advise them. And so my sister and I are very passionate about gender equality, not only in sport, but across corporate environments as well. And my sister had been working in the diversity, inclusion, and equality space for her work in the corporate space. And so we combined those two and we said, how can we bring these coaches together? And we basically launched our network on Facebook because we wanted to make it accessible for everyone. We know that data is an issue a lot in, Africa, Asia, South America, and even in Europe. So we wanted to make it easy for people to access. And basically the aim of the network is for female coaches to engage, empower, and elevate each other to success and provide a safe environment for women to nurture each other, ask questions, and empower each other so that we can be the best that we can possibly be.
Oh. And how many people are in your network now? And can you tell us a bit about the coaches inside the network, if you had liberty to say?
Sure. So we have about 550 coaches across the entire globe. And we've got coaches who are beginners, we've got elite coaches, And what's really great is we put together a leadership team, and all these women are trailblazers in their own right. We have Lauriane Dolt from France, who was the first woman to be an assistant coach in Pro A in France on the men's league. She's now head coach of a men's Division 3 team there. We've got 2 NBA assistant coaches who are from America and Cape Verde, Portugal. We've got Coach Caddy from Senegal, who coached in the BAL as an assistant coach with Dakar University in the 2022 season. We've got Flo McIntyre, who's an assistant coach with the Sydney Kings in the NBL here in Australia. So these leadership coaches come from around the world and are all trailblazers in their own right. We also have some amazing female head coaches who have worked with national teams, who work with junior national teams. And we've got a number of coaches who are, just coaching for their first time or coaching at the club level. And so that diversity in experience, diversity in culture has really allowed a melting pot of different experiences. And so we've all been able to learn from each other, and it's been very inspiring to know that we have a network that we can fall back on if we have a question or an issue. And basically it's due to the power of the network. That's how I see it.
And back to African basketball for a little bit. What would you like to see in the short term and in the long term? Because as you've mentioned, you've coached on the African continent for about 12 years now. So what would you like to see?
I would love to see the BAL turn into one of the best, continental basketball leagues in the world. I really can see us having the talent to be able to drive that, not only with our African talent on the continent, but to have Africans playing overseas come home and join the league. And I see that happening over the next 5 to 10, 15 years. I would also like to see the development of like a female BAL, which is something that FIBA Africa is looking to launch in the next year or two, which is basically a revamping of club championships for women. I think it's really crucial that we see further development of junior programs, because we need to be able to develop talent at that junior level and basically improve the standard of the game from juniors onwards. But fundamentally, we can't do any of this without the readjustment and reformation of the administration of our sport at the federation level. We need to be more inclusive in terms of gender at this level. We also need people in these positions who care about the development of basketball, who aren't all about power, prestige, and money. So people who are genuinely interested about raising sponsorship, raising funds, and developing the game in their country. Then we need the infrastructure. And it's great to hear that Congo DRC is building a state-of-the-art facility there, but we also need to continue to develop those in Southern Africa, Eastern Africa, Western and Northern Africa, so that we're not continuously going to Senegal, Egypt, Rwanda, Angola, South Africa to host these tournaments, because we need to develop the games in other countries as well. And finally, coach development is crucial. We've got the talent, but we need local coaches to be able to develop that talent. And that's not only from a federation issue, that's FIBA Africa, that's FIBA and other NGOs coming in and helping to develop coaches at the local level, so that you don't get too many foreigners such as myself in there developing the game.
And what's next for Coach Liz Mills? Do you think we'd ever see you coaching a women's basketball team in the future?
Well, it's funny you say that, because actually I'm going to be coaching in the Global Jam, which in Toronto, Canada, which is a national competition where, Canada national team, USA national team, and Puerto Rico national team, women's teams under 23 are all competing. And I will be head coach of Team Africa, the women's team, which is BAL for her. And so this is my first time coaching a women's team from Africa. And it's amazing, because it's not just Rwanda, it's not Uganda. These young ladies all come from across the continent and are, currently at college playing at the highest level in America. And so it's such an amazing opportunity to finally be able to coach an African women's team. And I'm really excited about that because it's been 12 years and I'm looking forward to, being able to dip my toe back in there. The BAL men's team will also be there, under 23 team. So it's a great opportunity to showcase African talent. But on a more personal and professional level, I would love to continue coaching in the BAL until I win a title, and then I can leave happy. And my other goal is to coach a men's national team from Africa, be that at the World Cup or at the Olympics, and be the first woman to do that. And so, the next World Cup is going to be in 2027. And so I've got 4 years to work on that. And then the plan is to retire as soon as I've achieved those goals and start looking more at mentoring coaches and, looking at coach development across the continent.
And then we're going to go to our segment called Rapid Fire Questions. So I need you to think not too hard, but just a bit about yourself. So what's your favorite moments in basketball history?
Oh, I think, it's going to have to be qualifying with the Kenya men's national team for the AfroBasket in 2021. Just too many things all fell into line. Beating Angola, 28 years since they'd participated, being the first woman to lead a team. And so that's always going to be my number one. I know it's personal. I probably should have gone with something else. Oh, probably the Spurs winning in 2015. I loved that as well.
Okay. And then out of all the cities that you've lived in, which one is by far your favorite?
Well, this is tough. I really, really, really love Lusaka because it feels like home away from home. Haven't been back since 2017 though. So I'd have to say the more recent is Kigali, Rwanda. I love that city. It's small, it's easy to get around, super clean, and Rwandese people, super friendly. Love them. It's a beautiful country. So if I had to live anywhere in the world right now, it would be Kigali.
Okay. And then what's one aspect of Africa you'd want everyone to experience?
The people, for sure. Be that in South Africa, Zambia, Kenya, Cameroon, wherever I have been, it's the people that make me want to keep coming back. And so I always recommend people like go to Africa. Sure, you can go on safari, you can go and see temples, you can go see whatever, go see the pyramids, but being able to sit with the locals and understanding the culture and history of the continent is truly a life-changing experience.
And then a bit of a tricky one. If you could pick a starting five comprised of any players from this past season of the BAL, who would you pick?
Oh, this is really hard. Okay. I'm going to just pick my starting five, but I'll just say my starters and then I'll pick the B team. So that would be Omar Abada, Stefan Kanate, Abdullah Haruna, Tyler Ongwe, and Usman Drami. So excluding them, who would I pick? I would really like Jean-Jacques Boissy from AS Douanes. Really liked him at the point. Shooting guard. I really like Evans from Cape Town Tigers. I know he didn't get to play this season a lot. He's got a lot of potential and he probably needs to work on his defense. But I'm a big fan of him as a player. I think he's the next generation talent. And then 3 spot, I'm going to go with all Africans here. Who did I like at 3 spot? Oh, Carlos Moraes. Sorry, what am I even thinking about? Of course, Carlos. And then 4 spot would have to be probably Noni Amut from South Sudan. And 5 spot is Diarra from Mali. He was double. He was a machine. Great player. He's only 21, so it's scary. So that would be my non-ABC starting 5 that I'm.
Okay. And then Africans taking place in July. Which teams or players do you think everybody should look out for?
Oh, I think AfroCan is a really great competition, especially because it's built for local players playing in Africa who don't have the opportunity to play AfroBasket when those international players come back. So for me, teams to look out for, obviously DRC, they won in 2019. They're going to be really strong. Mali's going to be very strong. It's basically their BAL team plus a few internationals. Kenya is another really strong team. I expect them to do really well. So yeah, those three in particular. And I think dark horse, ooh, Cote d'Ivoire. I'll give Cote d'Ivoire the dark horse. But it also really depends. Like, Tunisia and Morocco and Angola are all in there. They used it last time to send their under 23 and under 25 teams for development. So without seeing their roster, it makes it a bit difficult. But if Tunisia takes it seriously, Angola takes it seriously, then, I definitely recommend, watching them too.
Okay. That's a wrap on our rapid fire questions and also a wrap on the interview. Thank you so much for being on the show and talking to us today.
Cindy, thank you so much for inviting me. And I've got to say, you were amazing. You've obviously done your research, which is really refreshing. And I really appreciate the in-depth time you've done to prepare for this. So thank you for all your effort. And I've really enjoyed being on the show.
Thank you so much. And where can everybody follow you across socials, and how can we keep track of Coach Liz Mills?
Well, so you can follow me on LinkedIn under Liz Mills. I'm on Facebook as Coach Liz Mills. On Instagram, I'm Coach Mills, coach.mills13. And on Twitter, I'm Coach_Liz Mills. So you can follow me on all the social media platforms, and happy for you to follow my journey.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you again for being on the show. Hope you have an enjoyable evening further, and we hope to catch up with you again soon.
Likewise, thank you.
That's it from us for this month's episode. Thanks for watching, listening, and being a part of this conversation. But don't keep it to yourself. Share it with your friends and family, and let's all engage on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Our handle is @FastBreakSA. To keep up with our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe. And thanks again, and we'll see you next month.